the centers. Just take up the oblique. Collisions. In this case, as I was saying, in case of head-on collision, what happened was that the velocities of the two objects were along the line which join the particles, or if we have extended bodies, it will be along the line joining the centers actually. But in case of an oblique collision, what happen is that the velocities of the colliding objects or particles, the velocities will not be along the line joining centers. That is what we have for oblique collisions actually. The way that we analyze the oblique collisions remains more or less the same. The tools available are still the same. We can conserve the momentum. Depends if we consider a closed system where we have no other external forces apart from the interaction between the two bodies. In those cases, we can conserve the momentum usually in any direction. But as it happens for an oblique collision, what is useful to consider is either two mutually perpendicular directions, or in some cases what we can do is we can just break the motion in two directions, one which is along the line that joins the two particles and the other one in a perpendicular direction. Usually it is useful to consider the interaction broken down into two components. One is along the line joining the centers. Divide the motion basically into two components. Along the line joining the centers. I mean, if they are point particles, then obviously we just join them along the line of the, break it along the line joining the two particles themselves. But if they are a bit extended, in that case, we have the line joining the centers actually. Along that direction, we can break the motion and perpendicular to that. And perpendicular to that. Okay. In that case, we will be able to analyze the entire thing by considering such situations. Along the line that join the two particles, we could apply the same ideas that we had for one-dimensional collision actually. While the other direction, it depends what situation we have. Let me first draw a diagram. The camera is a bit tilted by the way. Just wait. Okay, so the idea will be in this case to divide the motion in two directions. One will be along the line that joins the two particles, the other one in a perpendicular direction. To take up, for example, a situation where for example, we take up two objects. Both of them I'm going to behave or treat them like particles, for example, spheres, for example. We just consider two spheres. One, I'm just showing them big, they might be small as well. Obviously, for point particles, there's nothing like a oblique impact because the points, they will not have any size actually. For point particles, all collisions are going to be head-on, but when they have some extended size, then they have certain dimensions, which is not exactly a point-like dimension. In that case, they will be definitely dependent on what angle they collide. In fact, I'm assuming, for example, in this case, let us say that just prior to the impact, if I consider these two spheres, just before the impact, the velocities with which they are moving, it was making certain angle with the line that joined them, the centers. That's the line joining the centers. Just did it again. Find the mathematical difference. Say that this was moving with a speed u1 before the impact, while this one is moving, say for example, at an angle which is a different angle. Let's say like this, u2. u1, u2 are the velocities of the two spheres prior to the impact. Before the impact, they were moving like this, and immediately after the impact, we can, when the angles are known actually, let us say this angle is alpha, that is beta, that is with respect to the line joining the centers. And after the impact, the velocities are becoming v1, v2, and the corresponding angles with respect to the line joining centers can be taken as, say, for example, alpha prime and beta prime over there, or whatever you want. The point in this case is the analysis proceeds by considering the projection of velocities along the line that joins the two particles. Implies we have to first break it up, this velocity in this direction, this velocity in this direction, and the other components as well. The idea will be that if I look at this system as a whole, then along that line which join the two particles, these two objects over there, momentum conservation can be applied because it's a closed system. So we can write down equations relating to, there'll be obviously, in this case, if you look at the unknowns, there are a couple of unknowns. For example, we do not know the final velocities of these spheres immediately after the impact. Let us say that this is before, the other one is after. Consider, for example, after the impact, immediately after the impact, I'm just trying to show size has not changed. Immediately after the impact, say for example, there's a line joining the centers. So immediately after it, the velocities can be obtained. Let us say, for example, that what the easier thing to do in this case is to consider the fact that because the impact, whatever has happened, has taken place along the line that joins them, therefore, any changes in velocities will also appear in the same direction as well. The other direction, the direction of the perpendicular, implies along this direction, which is normal to the line joining centers. If the spheres are smooth, actually, there's no friction. In that case, the momentum, not only the momentum, the velocities will be conserved actually. What I'm saying in this case is that in this direction, perpendicular over here, the velocities need to be u1 sine alpha and u2 sine beta. These velocities will not change actually if I assume if the surfaces are frictionless. If there is no friction, in that case between the I'm talking about the bodies themselves. If there is no friction, if there is no friction between the two bodies, in that case, in this direction, the perpendicular direction, there has been no impulse at all individually among on each of them, because the interaction takes place only along the common normal. Therefore, in the perpendicular direction, there is no interaction at all, and for that reason, in the perpendicular direction, not only the momentum but the velocity is going to be conserved as well. I mean, obviously the mass remain the same. Therefore, the velocities in the other direction remain the same. They will not change actually. Whatever changes takes place, it has to be along the line that join the two centers. So we can now, say proceed exactly the same way I did for a one-dimensional collision. The only difference is that the incoming velocities will be u1 cos alpha and u2 cos beta, and the final velocities along this line, you can assume, for example, this is v1 and this is v2. That is along the line joining the centers actually. The other direction I said, we have the velocity is conserved because of the fact that there is no impulsive force in that direction actually. So the velocity will not change. But in the line joining centers, we can analyze that in exactly the same fashion that we do for one-dimensional collisions. Implies we can just conserve the momentum m1 into v1 plus m2 v2 must be equal to the initial momentum, which is m1 u1 cos alpha and m2 u2 cos beta. And the other direction, that the tangent, the velocity is already known actually. The other equation will be again the same equation, which is that of the restitution coefficient. In this direction, along again the line joining the centers, we can figure out apply the equation. The velocity of separation, which is v2 minus v1, is e times that of approach, which is e1 cos alpha plus u2 cos beta. Okay. So the other part, which is the analysis of velocities in this direction, it remains the same. That is the only difference we have. Even if I do not take such a situation, if I do not know exactly what angle they are kind of colliding actually, even in the broader scenario, I can actually consider any two directions, not necessarily these two directions. I can just set up any two mutually perpendicular directions, and in both directions, the momentum will be conserved. Obviously, the restitution coefficient will work only along the line joining centers actually. In this case, the restitution coefficient, or in fact, I wrote it earlier as well. The fact is, we're going to talk about only the velocities appearing along the line joining the centers. Okay, that is going to be happening if we need to apply the coefficient of restitution. In most cases, or in fact, in most of the cases that we shall be dealing with, the energy, the collisions will be given to you perfectly elastic actually. In those cases, we can actually work also with the energy conservation. So we shall have set of equations like two equations for two mutually perpendicular directions, momentum conservation. And if I do not know in this case the restitution coefficient, or I do not know, for example, at what angle they collide, I cannot apply the restitution coefficient actually. So in those cases, the energy conservation will work. Total energy, kinetic energy rather, must be conserved actually. Okay, that's usual trick or usual way that we approach the problem. Obviously, if it happens that there is some friction between them, then you have a problem. If there is some friction between the two spheres, then actually when they collide, the reaction between them will be an impulsive force, and therefore the friction will also be impulsive actually. So this friction will in fact affect the direction of, affect the velocities in a direction that is perpendicular to the motion as well. So that will be more complicated. Instead of looking at the case where we have friction, if say when both are moving and then we have friction, instead of that, it is useful, or it will be easier to consider, for example, a case where a ball is colliding with a floor, for example, or a wall, for instance. Let's take that one first, and then this one we shall just work with some examples because the technique remains the same actually. At least when the friction is absent, it is exactly the same. With friction present, it's very complicated, and I don't think that we shall be required to deal with that actually. Okay, we shall see if the need arises, but for the moment, consider what happens. For example, there is a ball which say falls on the floor, and there's some friction. Say for example that we have the floor over here. A ball is thrown down on it at some angle, or a sphere basically is thrown in a direction that makes an angle which is alpha with respect to the normal. So this is the direction of motion along which we have just thrown it with the speed u. Okay, and immediately after the collision, okay, I might show this to get closer over there, or at least when it's colliding, just before the impact is what I want. It was moving with the speed u, for instance. At the instant it collides with the floor. I'm just showing incoming. While after the impact, for example, let us say the direction of motion is beta, and it is moving at speed v. This one is after the impact. This is before. This is after. Suppose that the restitution coefficient is given to be E. And the friction coefficient is going to be mu between the ball and the floor actually. Let's think of this one. As I was saying in this case, if we consider the collision between the ball and the floor over here, first of all, the restitution coefficient is applicable only in the normal direction, perpendicular direction, okay? That is in this direction. If I look at the normal direction, the outgoing velocity will be E times the incoming velocity, in fact, in that particular direction. Over here, in this case, we could write down, for example, that the outgoing velocity, which is v cos beta, I'm assuming that beta in this case, the angle with respect to normal at which the velocity is inclined. Obviously, if it happened that it was perfectly elastic collision, if there is no friction present, alpha and beta would be same. In fact, even if it was a, well, with the friction present, things will be different definitely. And say even if the friction was not there, for example, the angle beta would be different because the outgoing velocity in the common normal direction will be a bit different. While if the friction was not there, the incoming, the velocity of component of the horizontal component will be actually the same if there was no friction present. If there was no friction, then you could actually obtain the fact that you sine alpha in this case will be same thing as v sine beta. They'll only give you one equation over there. In this case, however, that will not work. In this case, because it is going to be friction present, that will be therefore affecting the horizontal velocity as well. Okay. If I consider this along the common normal, for example, if I look at the common normal, implies in this case this line normal. In this direction, if I consider, as said already, there is a coefficient restitution present E, which implies that the outgoing velocity, which is v cos beta, is equal to E times u cos alpha. That's the first equation. Remember, in this case, if you look at the unknowns over there, there are actually two. One is the speed v, and the other one is the angle beta. We'll have to find both of them. At least require two equations. One we have already got. The other equation, what would be the other equation? What do you think about the other equation in this case? What will happen in the direction that is along the floor? What will happen in that direction? What do you think about that? Along the direction, along the parallel to the ground, actually, what will happen is the fact that friction will actually change the velocity, momentum. In fact, the mass is the same. So we can just say that in the direction of the floor, whatever is the increment or change rather in the momentum must be caused by the impulsive force in that direction. And notice in this case that because the normal reaction is going to be impulsive, which implies it is acting for a very short duration, large amount, and there is a tendency to slip. In fact, the sphere when it collides, velocity in the forward direction, so it will tend to slip, in fact, which implies that the friction is actually acting in a backward direction, and that is also impulsive in nature, in fact. The friction will be, in fact, try to slow it down, and because normal reaction is impulsive, in this case, the friction will be impulsive as well, which implies in this case the friction force will be also quite large because n is large, in fact. So that will also affect the momentum parallel to the ground actually. Okay, it kind of obviously decreases because the friction acts in the backward direction. So we could write a decrement in this case, and say attribute that decrement to the friction impulse. If I consider the normal reaction between the floor and the surface as n, which is impulsive again, and suppose that the time interval for the collision is a very small time interval delta t. In that case, the impulse of normal reaction becomes n into delta t, and that is the one which should cause the change in momentum in this case. Okay, you will also notice in this case that if I take the normal reaction n, from the with respect to the floor and the sphere actually, the normal reaction n acts for a relatively we consider the normal reaction n acting for a short duration delta t over here. In that case, you could write down that the impulse of the normal reaction, the impulse is n dt, that is the impulse of normal reaction. This is equal to the change in momentum in the perpendicular direction. What is the change in the momentum in the normal direction, by the way? The final momentum is upwards, which is mv cos beta. The initial momentum was downwards, which is mu cos alpha. And because directions are opposite, which implies numerically the momentum must be added up actually to find the change, isn't it? So what we should have is this must be equal to the mass into v cos beta plus u cos alpha actually. V cos beta plus u cos alpha, that's happening to be added up. The reason is quite simple because they're in opposite directions actually. The final one is upward, initially is downward. The upward momentum is, the impulse is upward as well. So the change becomes in the upward direction, v cos beta minus u cos alpha, which is going to be giving us plus actually. Yeah? And because we already have this equation v cos beta equal to eu cos alpha, we could write on this one as e into m into 1 plus e actually into u cos alpha. This is going to give us the required, because v cos beta will replace by eu cos alpha, so I can just pull out u cos alpha common, and we end up getting 1 plus e remaining. This is therefore the impulse of normal reaction, and in the direction that is parallel to the surface, there is some friction, so that is also impulsive because n is impulsive, and in this case there is a tendency of slipping. So n mu into n has to be the friction force actually. So what we can consider therefore is because it's parallel to the ground in this case. In that situation, the impulse of the friction F into delta T. F is the friction force in this case, which is impulsive as well. That will be equal to the change in the momentum in the horizontal direction. In this case, the magnitude is what I'm writing down. F delta is positive. The magnitude of the friction is that one. Obviously, the initial velocity will be more compared to the final one, so it will decrease actually. The decrement is I'm writing down because I've all taken the negative sign into, the friction direction is all taken into account backwards. So just consider this case, it will decrease the momentum, and the decrement therefore has to be m into u sine alpha minus v sine beta actually. That's the other equation that we've got. The friction F delta T will be same thing as mu into n delta T, because F is same as mu into n. That gives us in this case this thing. And because mu n is or n delta t is known in this case, so I could therefore write down from here that mu into n delta t is m into 1 plus e u cos alpha. That will be same thing as m into u sin alpha minus u sin alpha minus b sin beta. From these two, I mean m gets cancelled out, and because u is already known in this case, cos alpha is also known. So from there I can solve for v sin beta. In fact, that is what I'm looking for. V sin beta is the component in the direction parallel to ground actually. So if I just find from here v sin beta, we end up getting what? I get u sin alpha minus mu 1 plus e into u cos alpha actually. From there, if you're joining now, you just take a snapshot by the way, and then later on we can write it down. I'm just rubbing the entire thing up, okay? So we get v sin beta from there. As m gets cancelled out, I get u into sin alpha minus minus 1 mu into 1 plus e into cos alpha. As we have, this becomes the vertical component, horizontal component parallel to the ground actually for v, and this will be giving us the component the other perpendicular direction. So we have these two equations 1 and 2. So, but obviously we can solve for v and the angle as well. We can just square them and add them up these two equations. Upon squaring, adding them up, I'll be able to find v, the speed actually. And if I divide them, I can get the angle as well. If I divide these two equations, I get tan beta equal to certain equation which relates the alpha and the other parameters over there. In this case, obviously the angle will be difficult to calculate, but one thing that you could see from here is that if it happens that the collision is perfectly, so there's no friction actually. If there's no friction, then mu turns out to be 0 in this case, and then we shall end up getting that dividing will give us that tan of beta will be actually same thing as tan alpha by e actually, which implies if I consider the case that there is no friction present, in that case the angle will be nothing but tan beta will be nothing but 1 by e times tan alpha actually. But with the presence of the friction, it obviously becomes complicated. Okay, I mean the analysis should be straightforward. I mean, say one way is always to consider the head-on. I mean, say the direction joining the two centers, and if it turns out to be a perfectly elastic collision, then actually you can apply the same ideas which we had. I mean, not only that, even if we look at say which are collisions not elastic perfectly, even then the same techniques are applicable. Only thing we have to be careful is to easier what is turning out to be is to consider the motion along the line joining centers and perpendicular to that one. That is the one thing that we should keep in mind. Okay. For instance, if I consider a situation where No friction. Well, if there's no friction, you put mu equal to 0. If there's no friction, simply put mu equal to 0. This part will be gone. V sin beta will become u sin alpha, and V cos beta becomes E into u cos alpha. So the speed will be actually turning out to be nothing but u into sine square alpha plus E square cos square alpha, the square root of that. And I mean, say the angle can be obtained. You can divide. This part is gone in any case. So divide them. I get V tan. I mean, V cancels out. So I get tan beta is nothing but 1 by E times tan alpha. That's what we have. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Suppose there is a sphere moving with a speed of 10 meter per second. It impinges on a smooth plane. Say, for example, take up the situation where this ball, the sphere, is moving with a speed of 10 meter per second. In this case, say for example, okay, for people who are still joining, we have been dealing with the oblique collisions actually. And I was saying that for such an oblique collision, usual strategy is to break the motion in two directions. One is the direction of the line joining centers, the other one perpendicular to that. If they're point particle, then obviously the only collision that can happen is the head-on collision. But for non-point object, so you might have something which is non-head-on, which is called an oblique case actually. The general strategy remains in this case to break the motion into parts. One is when there is, I mean, one is the line that joins the centers and the other one perpendicular to that. In case of the line joining centers, the analysis goes exactly like the head-on case, and the other direction, the direction where the which was parallel to, or which was, I mean, say which is what I was saying, which was along the direction that is perpendicular to the line joining centers. In that case, if there is no friction then between the bodies, then the velocity will be conserved. But if there is some friction, then we'll have to look at the impulses of the friction as well. Okay, and that will create a bit of problem. We shall just take that when things arise. Suppose that there's a sphere which is moving with a speed of 10 meter per second. It impinges or just strikes a smooth fixed plane. Strikes a smooth fixed plane at an angle of 45 degrees. If the restitution coefficient is given to be 4 by 5, what will be the velocity and direction of the ball after the collision? Find that out. Okay, in this case we have the velocity, the ball moving at a speed of 10 meter per second, strikes the floor at an angle of 45 degrees. We need to figure out the final velocity, which implies speed and direction as well. In case the restitution coefficient is 4 by 5, but there's no friction, mu is 0 actually. What will be the final velocity of the ball? That's the question. Find it out. Root 82. That is speed, yes, that's fine. And what about the angle? Approximately. Okay, that's fine. 10 was 4 or 5 is okay. It will be simple enough in this case. When there is no friction, it becomes relatively simple because the velocity parallel to the ground will remain conserved because there's no friction. That will imply that 10 sine 45, which is implying 5 root 2, will be same thing as 5 root 2 after later on. So the velocity in this direction will be same. The other direction will be just flipped by e because restriction coefficient is e actually, which implies the velocity immediately after the collision upwards will be e times 10 by root 2, isn't it? Which implies e times 5 by root 2. I mean 5 root 2, sorry. That will be the vertical velocity. Horizontal velocity remains 5 root 2, so we can figure out the speed as square root of the two velocities squared, and the direction is also known, isn't it? In this case, this velocity remains after the collision, same thing as 10 sine 5 root 2 meter per second. Well, in this direction, the velocity will be nothing but e times 5 root 2, which implies 4 root 2 meter per second. And therefore, total speed, that will be root over of 5 square into 250 plus 32. So I get root over of 82 meter per second. And the other, the angle can be calculated because the vertical velocity is known. This one horizontally is known. So you get 4 by 5 as the tan of the final angle actually. That will give us the required result. Fine. Okay. Let's look at situation where we have oblique collision between two spheres actually. This time, say for instance that there's a ball of mass 5 kg and moving with velocity 15 meters per second. The parallel. like this. Say for example, okay, yes, we have in this case two spheres. They are moving. One of them is 5 kg, the other is 10 kg. 5 kg sphere is moving with a speed of 15 meter per second, and a 10 kg with a speed of 5 meter per second, and they're both moving at the time of impact in directions which are parallel, and that forms an angle 30 degree with respect to the line joining centers. With this line, the angle was 30 degrees actually of both the velocities in fact. So after the coefficient of restitution is given to be half, we need to determine the final speed of the two spheres, assuming there is no friction between them. They are smooth spheres actually. Smooth spheres, so there is no friction, and therefore the say mu zero in that case. We have to figure out in this case the speed of each of the spheres after the impact. How much will be that? Do it. The idea remains the same as I said already. Along the line joining the centers, you can look at the usual one-dimensional collision, while in the perpendicular directions, the velocity remains conserved in this case because there is no friction. So I already know direction of velocity in this direction over there. That I know the velocities themselves. You've got it. Nobody's got anything so far? That was root over of 5 would 3 over 4. Wait. No, that is not coming up. This is not okay, Rahul. Some mistake you have done. The answers given are something else. Is 5 into root 3 for one of them, and the other one is containing root 13 in the, answer. The mistake you have done. Ah, great. So the other component remains the same actually. Okay, I think we finish it up. Nobody else is able to do so. That's quite interesting. Weird, by the way. Anyway, as I already said, in this case, the velocity is perpendicular to the line joining the centers will remain unchanged because the friction is not there. So in that direction, the velocities remain conserved, which implies after the collision. Sure. Okay, so you could combine them. I think you'll get the required result. The answer I should give for the full thing, not for part. After the collision, what would happen? I said already. In this direction, the velocity is remaining conserved, which implies you get 15 into sine 30 degrees, which is half in fact. So in this direction, the velocity remains conserved. This will be 15 by 2 meter per second. And this will be 5 into this will be 5 by 2 meter per second. They are remaining conserved because in that direction there is no friction. The other component that we have, let us consider this to be, for example, V1 and V2. These are the other components I'm considering, V1, V2. The components parallel to the, say, along the common normal, V1 and V2. Then the usual techniques will work. First of all, the momentum will be conserved because this is a closed system actually. Momentum conservation gives us 5 into V1 plus 10 into V2. This should be equal to the previous momentum, which was how much? It was 5 into 15 cos 30 degree. In SI units, 5 into 15 cos 30 degrees and 10 kg into 5 cos 30 degrees. This equation should be valid. That is to say, you could simplify it. 5 can be cancelled throughout. So I get V1 plus 2V2 equal to 15 into cos 30. That makes it 15 by 2 root 3. And 5 is cancelled. I get 10 into root 3 by 2. Okay. That will be one equation, and I can just simplify it up. I get in this case V1 plus twice V2 equal to 25 by 2 root 3. That's the first equation I've got. The other equation will be by considering the restitution coefficient, the separation velocity along the common normal. If I utilize the law of collision, in that case, we shall have the separation speed is nothing but V2 minus V1. V2 minus V1 is separation speed, while the approach speed would be the difference in velocity for the initial velocities, which will be, for this one it was 15 cos 30 degrees, and that one was 5 cos 30 degrees. So the approach speed becomes 15 minus 5 cos 30 degrees. I get 15 cos 30 degrees minus 5 cos 30 degrees. That gives us basically that V2, which is visible, minus V1 equal to 15 minus 5, 10 cos 30 degree. which is 10 root 3 by 2. That is 5 root 3 basically. That is the second equation I've got. And we need to just solve these two equations to get v1 and v2. And then root over of v1 square plus this square will be the speed of the first ball, and root over v2 square plus 5 by 2 whole square will be speed for the second. Oh, sorry, by the way, it will be half in fact, because the distribution coefficient is half over that. It will be in effect by 4 actually, 5 by 2. Very good. The equation will be different. So this is the other equation I've got. The first one is mistaken. I need to solve for these one. It's easy enough. I can just add these two up to end up getting v1 twice v1. So v2 will be actually 3 v2 will be the sum of these two. That makes it 30 by 2 root 3, which implies we know v2 as 10 root 3. That is what I think. Right. So adding 1 and 2 becomes what? 1 plus 2 implies 3v2 equal to 30 by 2 root 3 is 15 root 3. Yeah, that implies v2 is turning out to be 5 root 3. Okay, that is what you have said in there. Wait here for a second. And therefore v1 can be calculated. v1 turns out to be, I can use one of the equations. This equation is considered v2 minus 5 by 2 root 3. So that makes it 5 root 3 minus 5 by 2. So I get 5 by 2. 5 by v2 is 5 root 3 minus the other place. This is v1. These are the velocity components that we have got parallel to the line joining centers. So you can now find the speed of the first one. That turns out to be root over v1 square plus 15 by 2 whole square. You can simplify that up. And similarly for the other one as well. Okay, that is therefore found. Okay. At least the idea should be clear enough. What we need to perform it to do. Check another one. Okay, I have sent an image in WhatsApp. You need to, can you access this one? We need to solve question number 1.169 first, actually. Question number 1.169. Can everybody access the WhatsApp? Oh, great. So it starts this. Sahar is presenting, fine, good. You can see question number 1.169 is what I want. Yeah, that's fine. Just keep 1.169. Slightly scroll down. Yeah, that'll be okay. I think everyone can access at least now. Anyway, there are two parts of it. Essentially, there's this. It says particle, but quite obviously, there'll be the particle is not always a point particle. It may have some size. So it experiences a perfectly elastic collision with a stationary particle too to determine the their mass ratio. If after a head-on collision, the particles fly apart in the opposite direction, uh, with equal velocities, first part, second part, they will fly symmetrically at an angle of 60 degrees with respect to initial directions. Find out in this case the mass ratio in both cases. Hemshil has exam today, isn't it? What time the exam starts?
750. 750.
7:50. Okay. 7:19 it is. Today you have physics, isn't it? Or no, it's math, I think, isn't it? Yeah, it's math. Yesterday you gave the syllabus. I saw. Uh, option apart. Okay, once to just wait. No, it is not. Yeah, Bharti, that's correct. It's 1:3, in fact, for the first case. 1:3 is the required option. Ratio, actually. Haven't got yet. Second part. Anyone? First case should be more or less straightforward. You have to find a mass ratio if after head-on collision, the particles fly apart in the opposite directions in equal velocities. The particle 1 is moving and particle 2 was stationary to begin with. This is the second one. This is the first one, which is incoming, which is speed u, for example. It's given that after the collision, the result is that they fly apart in opposite direction with equal velocities. So after the collision, 1 is going to move this way, say the speed is v, and 2 is going that way with the speed say v again. So we have in this case determine the mass ratio m1 by m2. If I consider the usual tool, first of all, it's a closed system, so the momentum has to be conserved. So I get first of all that m1 into v. Let's say the forward direction is positive, so m1v is negative with a minus sign actually, plus m2 into v. That should be equal to m1 into u. That's one equation you have got. The other equation is for the restitution coefficient. Okay, fine. We have in this case, because the collision is perfectly elastic, therefore the relative speed at which they separate must be same as approach speed. Separation speed is twice v actually, and the approach speed is u. That's the second equation coming from the restitution coefficient. In this case, we can put this v in the first equation and end up getting minus m1. I mean m1 minus m1, or let's eliminate u, doesn't matter, plus m2 into v equal to m1 into twice v. V can be cancelled out. Take m1 that side, we get m2 equal to 3m1, giving us m1 upon m2 is 1:3. Okay. The second case, we have been given that the particles fly apart symmetrically relative to the initial motion direction. Particle 1 at an angle of divergence which is 6 degrees actually, which implies after the collision, what's happening is second case, it's not a head-on collision, but an oblique one. The second case, the incoming situation remains the same. 1 with the speed u collides a stationary particle 2 with a speed 0, m1, m2. But after the collision, they fly apart symmetrically relative to the initial motion direction, which implies after the collision, 1 and 2 are moving in symmetrical directions. Not necessarily the same speed, but the directions are same. But the initial line, this is the motion of, say, for example, 2, and this is for 1. This would be v1 for m1 and m2. The angle being 60 degrees in each case. Can work with symbols for the moment. Call it theta, that is 60 degrees. The same on this side as well, theta. In this case, we do not know exactly how, what angle they are colliding. We can't utilize that along the common normal and the perpendicular direction. So instead, in this case, we can just utilize the horizontal and the vertical direction in this diagram. The horizontal and the vertical diagram directions we consider. In any case, the momentum has to be remaining conserved in both directions actually. So that will be one thing that we shall do, conserve the momentum in the horizontal and vertical direction. We have in this case two unknowns, m1, v1 and v2, and m1, m2 as well. Strictly speaking, we have three. We have v1, v2 and m1 by m2 actually. So we'll have to have three independent equations as well. So for that case, if I consider the horizontal direction, I get in this case m1 into v1 cos theta, which is known 60 degrees in fact. So let's find the other one, and m2 v2 cos theta. That must be the incoming momentum m1 into u. That's our first equation. Theta is a known factor in this case. And the other equation in the perpendicular direction, we have m1 sine v1 sine theta will be same thing as m2 v2 sine theta. This will be for the momentum conservation in the vertical direction, y direction in this case over there, perpendicular one. That's what we have. And the third equation that we can have, what can be in this case an extra information? We have elastic collision, but I do not know exactly when they're colliding, so I can't talk about common normal. But because a perfectly elastic collision in this case, because we can't apply the restitution coefficient, because we do not know exactly what direction they're colliding. So the other thing to do will be to conserve the kinetic energy, because it's a perfectly elastic collision. In that case, the kinetic energy remains conserved. So we get the third equation by utilizing the energy conservation, the kinetic energy conservation actually. If I consider the third equation, we do have three equations and three unknowns, as we just require the mass ratio, not individual masses. So we get three equations over there. I have in this case conservation of kinetic energy, is I've written down in short, conservation of kinetic energy, not the mechanical, I'm just talking about just the kinetic before and after the collision. Perfectly elastic collision, that's going to be valid. I get half m1 v1 square plus half m2 into v2 square. That must be half m1 into u square. That's our, okay, I can just cancel out half factor. We end up getting m1 v1 square plus m2 v2 square equal to m1 u square. So the third equation I've got. From these three equations, we need to determine m1 by m2 actually. So for that case, I need to eliminate v1 and v2 from these two equations. So what I can do, for example, I can just put theta equal to 60 degrees for the moment, and the first equation simplifies. If I put theta equal to 60 degree, I get this to be half. Anyway, this one cancels out. I already have got m1 v1 equal to m2 v2. Utilize that over here in this case. M1 v1 is equal to m2 v2. I can put in the first equation. So it will be easy. Second equation gives us m1 v1 equal to m2 v2, and therefore 1 implies this equation will give us m1 v1, and they are equal actually, so I can write down m1 v1 cos theta into 2, because they're both the same, equal to m1 u. So m1 cancels out. v1 is known, therefore v1 is turning out to be u by 2 cos theta, which is the same thing as u. Interesting, because cos theta is half, so I get v1 to be exactly equal to u. That is quite interesting. Well, maybe there may make a mistake somewhere. We have m1 v1 equal to m2 v2. It's symmetrical, so it has to be okay. Fine, that's good. Once I get v1, I can therefore obtain v2 as well in terms of m1, because since m1 v1 is equal to m2 v2, therefore v2 turns out to be m1 v1 by m2. That becomes m1 by m2 into u, as we have. v2 is known in terms of this one, and I can just this side. Utilize now the third equation. Third equation gives us just divide by m2. So I get m1 by m2 v1 square plus v2 square equal to m1 by m2 into u square. I can put v1 square as u square. Oh, this cancels out. How can it happen? There is something mistaken. Seems because v1 is already u, so the first one cancel out. That is bad. I have made some mistake. It seems. What is it? Let's wait. I'm just going to do 2. Are we interpreting the question something? In this case, there seems to be I made some mistake somewhere, by the way. It's also going to be time. Just do one thing. Take this one. I mean, I just finish and send it to the group. You can check it out later, or you can try it over there. I have already done the other parts, so I have to just work it out again. Some mistake possibly. Okay, so you just leave for now. You have schools any case over there exams, so it'd be useful if I do it later and send it to them.